Well, I think the best way to start is with the two main shells, white mother of pearl, which is white oyster, and a black mother of pearl, which is black oyster. And these oysters, originally wild oysters, were gotten from basically different places in Indonesia and Andaman Islands. There was this huge tsunami and all of these oyster beds got destroyed. And now really the only way to get these shells is from pearl farms. And in that sense they're very eco-friendly, because oyster which is left is basically a byproduct of pearl industry, which is very good for a lot of communities that don't have much other economic activity. They have these fabulous oyster farms, and they help train young people to do things which are very profitable and educational. And at the same time, the firms that do these oysters and pearls are making fairly large contribution to the local economies. So I'm going to show you these two types which I use the most in the very beginning. Like, for example, this is a white mother of pearl. It has been completely polished. Inside is always like that, because the mollusk needs to have absolutely no roughness. But outside they have to be polished. Maybe I'll show you the one that is not polished, just to see the difference. Unpolished, as coming from the sea, looks like this. I would get these shells from the pearl farms and then have them polished, and then return to place where there were some craftsmen, and I would draw with the flowmaster these lines where they would cut it and create pieces, which then I would use in various ways. Like here you can see something very similar. This is how it happened. So this is the white mother of pearl, or Pinctada maxima. This is black mother of pearl, or Pinctada margaritifera. And they also call them gold lip, which is, like you can see the difference, gold lip and black lip. Because when you open it, the lip is either gold or black. Anyway, so those were the first beginning. And these are actually wild shells, not from the pearl farms. But then the ones which are much smaller. And okay, so these are like two small pieces made from the black mother of pearl. These are actually made from the shells from the pearl farms, because they're small pieces. But then, when you go to pearl farms today, the range of sizes from this to basically this. While the old ones, I want to show you something. I mean, you can see here, this is like on a tree. This is all very well polished, but before it's polished you see the lines like on the tree, and you can tell that this one is probably 100 years old, if not more. I mean, they're fabulous. And then another little detail is they do have lots of enemies, these shells. There are certain conus shells that have a proboscis with a certain acid in it, and this little beautiful little shell comes, like one of them is this one. This is conch shell. They look so sweet and innocent, but they have this proboscis with which they can go through the shell and get to the meat and then pull the meat out. That's their main purpose and main goal. But you can see the iridescence on this. I don't know if I'm turning it properly. I mean, the iridescence on these wild shells is incredible. And on the shells raised on pearl farms, for example, in Tahiti, they have nothing like this iridescence any longer because there's too much pollution. There are too many tourists, too many boats, etc., etc., and they have lost this beautiful, iridescence that they had before. This piece is made from that particular size white mother of pearl. This basically fits something like that. Well, it's not typical, but it's more or less how they work. And then sometimes, I combine it with something else. Like this one is interesting because here I had a piece of periska from an old periska, and I incorporated it because this shape by itself was a little bit too difficult. But this material is chainmail, and that was very architectural material which I used way back in Montreal. We used to use it for the curtains in the theater because it is fireproof, and it was very popular and it looked fabulous. So this is one way to hang it on this chainmail. The other way was to have all of these pieces would be pre-cut already in Indonesia, and then I would ship them either here or to Washington, and then there, this is gold leaf. I put the gold leaf just to give it more kind of interest, and then this acrylic choker is something to match. Then there's this interesting bracelet, a little bit complicated, but it has this kind of Art Deco look, and I think that's why I basically like this shape. Then this is even more complicated. These are the circles made with mother of pearl, and then I just thread it with this material, which is actually I bought in Paris. It was designed by Yves Saint Laurent with this gold thread. Then there are pieces like that, which are sort of earrings, and the model was an Art Deco piece, and I had it actually copied in Indonesia, and the ring. Let me put it. The ring and the earrings. Sometimes, most of the time I was, with what I was making, this was the best combination, just plain squares and minimalist, but then occasionally I would find an Art Deco piece which was kind of elaborate and have them be inspired by that in Indonesia, because they are great craftsmen, and they actually hate to do these squares and circles because it's too boring. And then when I bring something like that, oh yeah, that's great, we love to do that. I brought some things from Croatia from Middle Ages patterns on the stone, and they were very happy about that as a little project. I'll start with Harvard, and they immediately offered me a scholarship, and that was done deal. So I studied for 3.5 years to get my master's, actually 4 years, and then I had a half a year at MIT where I was studying planning, but urban planning, but that was mainly because I couldn't leave Cambridge, Massachusetts. Like my whole life was there, and I was having summer job in the Architects Collaborative. This was the collaborative that was started by Gropius, and then he got some wealthier students from Harvard who helped him get started and finance the whole venture, etc. And then the Architects Collaborative became a very famous firm, and I had work basically around the globe. And that was a great experience. Then, after finally I was able to detach myself from Cambridge, Massachusetts, which really became like a home. I loved it. I think that was absolutely the best period of my life, because the future seemed fabulous. And one had no worries. You just had to study, which I loved. And basically, I was a happy camper there. And then after that, of course, I had to eventually get a job. And I had a job in the Architects Collaborative for a couple of years. But that was basically summer jobs, and then after I graduated, I got a full-time job. After that, I ended up going to Montreal because there was a major competition for certain big projects in Montreal, and I applied for it and I won. So I went to work on this project in Montreal, which was also very interesting. And even though, when one graduates, one doesn't know very much. But the farther you are from Harvard, the more, of course, in Cambridge, Mass, there are 5 architects per square meter. But once you're out, you become very special. And immediately you get the best project. So that's exactly what happened to me in Montreal. And I was very pleased and kind of happy professionally. But then, after a certain point, I was doing very important projects, and I was paid not very much. So I felt that I should be paid more, and I applied for a job in Calgary, where they were doing a big 8+ pedestrian system, because Calgary is extremely cold, and 8+ meant that it was 8 feet above the street level. There was a connection, kind of circulation from one building to the other, etc. And it was very interesting. It was more urban planning than architecture, but still it was quite interesting. And I managed to win that competition, which was all across Canada, so I was quite surprised, saying, geez, is everybody in Canada so not so impressive? What's going on? Anyway, then I got this, but then my husband didn't want to travel with me to Calgary because there were 2 reasons. It was very cold, and also it was sort of in the middle of nowhere in Canada. And then, but I was still unhappy with my pay in Montreal, where I worked with Webster Menkes, which was a huge firm, doing a lot of large-scale projects, which initially was very exciting, but then after a while, I felt I was working too hard and not being properly rewarded. So I applied to the World Bank to work as architect and urban planning on projects worldwide. And actually, I was accepted, and then when I was going to Calgary, my husband didn't want to come along. So in World Bank, I said, look, if you don't come along, you just stay here and I'm going there. Anyway, but so finally he applied too, and he also got a position. Well, he had just perfect also education and experience as far as they were concerned. He was an engineer, he got masters in business, etc., etc., and it was just the right combination. And so we ended up in Washington, D.C. And again, the same thing was repeated. I worked with the World Bank, but I wasn't really the World Bank type, because I was really, my biggest forte was inventing new ways to do things and new forms, etc. And in the World Bank, that's the last thing they want. They want to just follow the prescribed pattern and formula and they always used to say, don't rock the boat, don't rock the boat. So I was constantly rocking the boat on these projects, and I think they got tired of me. They didn't say so, but I definitely got tired of them, because I thought, well, why did I do that much study and that much fabulous education to be just doing some mediocre formula kind of projects. And also another part which was not so interesting is a lot of this World Bank project were slum improvements. So basically all you had to do is come up with the scheme for the basic systems, etc., and then the local architects would basically do the rest. So after a while I got tired of that, and then I decided to apply for the major project in Washington, D.C., which was the architect in charge was Ian Pei, who was already quite famous in U.S. because he did some major projects in Washington and elsewhere. In Washington, he did the National Gallery, East Wing, and was quite celebrated for that, and some other things. And he got this enormous job, which was supposed to be the Ronald Reagan Trade Center, it was named, but it was supposed to be one of the world's major culture, business, politics kind of center. It ended up being one of the largest projects in Washington. The only two projects which were the same size in terms of square footage, which was over 3 million square feet, was Pentagon and the World Bank. So anyway, that was an amazing opportunity, and basically I got very involved with it, to the point that I couldn't really think of anything else, because there were so many design issues, and this is so challenging and so inspiring, and how should I put it? You just live it. Everything else is less interesting, and everything else is kind of boring and mundane in comparison. So I should have really been living alone, with nobody around, and just been dreaming these solutions day and night. Finally, at the same time, my husband at the time was sent to Prague. And in the World Bank, all the bosses were inviting me for dinners and suppers and lunches, etc., wanting to know why I don't want to go to Prague. I said, look, I'm a director of design and design development, and I cannot leave until it's finished. And such projects of such huge size always take longer than planned, especially that one, because it was a government financed project, and it was over $1 billion, which at the time was enormous amount of money, etc., etc. So anyway, I was not able to leave until basically that project was finished. Then when I came to Prague, well, I was so wound up, so full of adrenaline, I couldn't just sit and be a hostess like all these ambassadors' wives, etc., which was their main job. So immediately I came up with another project, which was an urban project of sort of urban renewal in Lvov, Ukraine. So I ended up going there. Then, during that period of being again in touch with professionals, I ended up getting involved with the foundation of Prince Charles, because they were doing some projects in Prague, etc. And we were discussing things and planning, etc. And so at that point there was already a war in Croatia, and the president of this foundation, Prince Charles Foundation, was sort of curious about Croatia, and he said, we would love to do a project in Croatia if you could help us to sort of connect with whoever is necessary to connect, and we would like to do a project there. Something, urban renewal, there are a lot of things after the war that needed help. So I said, look, they've been given so many promises in Croatia, and a lot of it doesn't come to very much. So I don't think they'll be very excited. And there are plenty of architects and planners in Croatia who could do a lot of these jobs quite well. I said, maybe the only way you could excite them to think about it is to bring Prince Charles. But, I just said it facetiously, not really making a proposal, but just to kind of let him know that people have become quite jaded in terms of all these offers from abroad. And he said, well, maybe it's possible. And then at some point later, I was already in Korčula, and I'm not going to go into all the details how I was organizing this program, how I invited people from the European Union, from the World Bank, one of the vice presidents who was in Indonesia and then flew straight to Dubrovnik to be part of it, etc., etc. It was a huge amount of work. Of course, everything was pro bono because I was trying to do as much as possible for New Croatia. And I was having a lot of problems because each time I printed a program, some minister or somebody this or that who was important couldn't make it because they had something more important. So I had to change the program and print it twice. And then finally I was here in Korčula, normally getting calls from plumbers and people like that, and all of a sudden there's another call and it's from Buckingham Palace. Well, that was a bit of a, dramatic moment, and they said, well, Prince Charles could come on the 8th of August on his way from Greece, where he was in this Meteora monastery, to London, because last time he was in Dubrovnik, it was raining, he didn't see anything, so he would come with his plane to Dubrovnik and then join us on this trip by boat to Mljet, and anyway, then we take it from there. So at this point, then I informed everybody that Prince Charles was coming, and everybody was free. Everybody, from Prime Minister Matesha down to British Ambassador, Minister of Culture, Minister of Tourism, Governor of Neretva County, etc., etc. Anyway, so we were on this boat. I think it was Galeb, it was Tito's boat, and we Well, no, then there is another interesting detail. The list of people who were to be invited was very, very restricted and very carefully edited by people in Dubrovnik who were kind of in charge of cultural events. So, last minute, we were already getting onto the boat, and there was this wonderful woman running from somewhere and waving, saying, wait, wait, wait. And it turned out to be Francesca von Habsburg. So, of course, everybody knew who she was. She was already doing a lot of interesting work in Croatia in terms of art conservation. And supposedly she and Prince Charles knew each other. So anyway, even though she was not on the list, she ended up on the boat. And the reason why I'm mentioning her, because it became important later on, because we were going to Bled, but Lopud was an island on the way, and Lopud was an island for which I, while working for World Monuments Fund in New York, I got some money to seed capital to start the restoration of Lopud Monastery, Samostan. And basically, because that wasn't so urgent, but that's for what the money was approved, some $100,000, which is kind of seed capital. And then that money was transferred to Dubrovnik to be used to fix the roof of the Samostan Mala Braća. So Lopud didn't in the end get anything, even though I have this list of all the projects that were financed. Maybe I'll show this list later, this big kind of interesting poster. And so Lopud got nothing, but then Francesca was on the boat and she said, look, don't worry about Lopud. I'm going to take over Lopud. I'm going to find the money and finance it, etc. And in fact, this is what she did, but that's another long story I'm not going to get into. Then, what happened after that? After that, that was in '96, that trip of Prince Charles. Before that, I listened to a talk by this famous French, what is his name? Cousteau. I was so impressed by his enthusiasm, talking about the sea, how to save it, how to preserve it, how to educate people more about the issues connected with the sea, etc., that I said, geez, it's really pity that I didn't study marine biology or something like that, because it would be fascinating work, especially now that seas are getting so polluted, they're becoming like one big toilet bowl, everybody's throwing junk into it, etc. And but I couldn't stop thinking about him and his talk, and then I said, well, I'm not a marine biologist, but maybe, since at the moment I have no major project, maybe I could start experimenting with doing design with, things from the sea, like with shells, for example. Because I was collecting a lot of beautiful shells, especially in India, when I used to go to Kanyakumari, which is on the very southern tip of India, where you have a meeting of 3 oceans. They had the most unbelievable shells, and I couldn't resist them. Each time I would buy some, and my husband would say, geez, why do we need so many shells? We already have so many. I mean, why do we need more? I said, I don't know why I need more. I don't need more, but this one is so beautiful, I can just not resist it, and I have to have it. And so this was one one kind of fascination with these shells. Then on one trip to Philippines again, I saw this unbelievable variety of shells that I've actually never seen before in my life, that many shells. And then all along I was quite interested in this art form which was intarsia with mother of pearl. And I collected objects here and there, nothing very specific, but I just liked it, so I would always get something or the other in that of that craft of mother of pearl in lacquer, like they were doing all over China. I mean, all the Pacific Rim countries had their own version of this particular craft. And this was actually fascinating because even though the materials were more or less the same, the expression, of course, cultural aspect and cultural expression was different in each one. Like if you look at the mother of pearl box from China or mother of pearl box from Thailand, there's a huge, huge difference. So this is what really excited me, how, you know, the design input in each region was so varied. Anyway, so then, you know, at one point I said, well, maybe I should definitely start working with shells. And I had a friend who was, while we were in Prague, she was our neighbor, they were Thai ambassadors. And I called her and I said, look, Pasharin, I have this crazy idea I have no large project at the moment, things are just kind of, I don't know what to do next. And I thought I would start doing some experimental design with shells. Something new, something that has never been done before. And she said, geez, you're really lucky because next to our summer residence, there's a huge shell dealer. And he has the most enormous wild shells from Andaman Sea and from all sorts of other places. And you can definitely check it out and see what happens and, you know, what you think you can do with it. So anyway, I, of course, very soon traveled to Bangkok, and we went from Bangkok to Hua Hin, where is this summer residence. And sure enough, there was this huge shell dealer. When I went in, it was also overwhelming. He had this enormous white one is Pictada maxima, and the black one is Pictada margaritifera. He mainly had Pictada maxima because this Pictada margaritifera and black oysters basically are coming from Tahiti and other places, but Andaman Islands and southern and Indonesia, etc., they all had this Pictada maxima, which was white with a golden rim. Very beautiful and quite large. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, I got some of these shells and now I have no idea what to do with them. I want to do something, but what? So, I mean, being an architect, I mean, this was quite obvious. The shells were big, and I would draw on these shells like squares, circles, and triangles, but big. And then it was lucky that we found some craftsmen who could cut it and polish it. And they said, oh, this is so big, nobody's going to wear that. I said, well, don't worry, you know, people in Europe are bigger, and like if I can wear it, anybody can wear it in Europe. For Asians, it's too big, I agree, but for Europeans, no. And so that was my very first effort. And I returned back to Paris, and now I felt, you know, I have to learn something about this craft because, I mean, I've been buying these objects, I know something about it, but not very much. But France was actually had a huge period of French Art Deco when they used that material in a big way for just about everything. And because they had plenty of it coming from their colonies. So I decided I'm going to go to the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Louvre and go to the library and see if I can find some books and read about this mother of pearl during Art Deco period. So I talked to a lady who was helping me find the book, and she was always bringing something which was not it. It was like ivory or tortoise shells or this or that, and I said, no, I just want mother of pearl, which they call nacre. I just want something with nacre. And at the same time, I was already wearing one big square of nacre, which was kind of cut in a certain interesting way. And she said, well, you already have a piece. I said, that's exactly why I want to learn more about it, because I started to experiment with this, making these large pieces. And I don't know if anybody would like it, and I want to see what has been done in the past, etc. And when she heard that, she said, oh, do you mind if I call our curator? Of course I didn't mind, and that's how I got my involvement with Musée des Arts Décoratifs, just coming off the street with no, no preparation, nothing, which was really very lucky. It turned out it was very lucky because then, after they exhibited my things first in the boutique, I got a lot of offers from different galleries in Paris to exhibit my stuff, but I didn't have very much. So next year I immediately went back to Bangkok and produced much more. So basically by 2000, when I left Paris, I was in 7 galleries and all sorts of exhibits, and then I got also offers from Italy. There was a big show, and that was a great success. I got my first publicity, like in a major magazine, Ornamenta, etc., etc. Anyway, but from my point of view, I was just filling time between my last project and the next project as an architect. I didn't think of myself as a jeweler, and I had no experience in producing jewelry. It's a craft. I knew nothing about it. I was just a designer, designing shapes that were cut out of these large shells and then hanging them on the rubber or this or that. And that's how it basically started.